Hi everyone, I'm Airier. Today we're going to be looking at the new Warhammer 40K animation. Sorry, did I say animation? I meant story by Warhammer's very best fan. A fan with too much time, even. Yeah, no, I was trying to do intro. I'm not doing that again. That sounds stupid. Also, calling him the very best fan. I thought it'd be a funny play on words. I regret everything I said. Let's just pretend that never happened and there's nobody watching here. This is why I never start on time. I always say something even dumber than usual. I'll just log off and come back in like 20 minutes like normal. It's not like I spend 20 minutes practicing the intro. That would be silly. This is Star Wars Warhammer 40K, episode 45, The Light Flares by a fan with too much time. Now, I'm just going to be honest here. When I was just scrubbing through images to use as a thumbnail, I saw some very interesting pictures. And you have no idea how tempting it was not to unmute to get a spoiler. I didn't. But damn if I wasn't tempted. So we're going to jump right in, see what's going on, and figure out what the hell I'm missing, because it's me. I'm probably going to miss a lot of things. And I'm looking forward to every second of this, because we are in the second to last episode. Oh yeah, we're in the second to last episode. That is the second to last most disappointing thing I could say right now. Although it would be a little better if Fan suddenly comes out with, oh, by the way, I have everything pre-written for the end of this year, and you're going to get a new video every week for an hour long. He won't, because that's an absurd amount of writing, and the recording time to do all that, plus the editing and video work alone, would probably take that entire week, so I don't expect it, but it would be awesome. Yeah. So basically what I'm saying is, if you haven't already, there's a link below to Fan's video. Hit it up, go subscribe to the guy, and if he has a Patreon, I'm pretty sure he does, go support him, because he does good work. Let's get started. Also, for everyone in the chat, talking about how it is kind of weird that I'm here on time. I mean, technically I am 3 minutes late, so that's still late. I was an hour and a half early yesterday, so give me a little credit. I'm usually at least somewhat late. Although I started the recording early, I didn't actually do any reactions early, so that doesn't count. More important, we're going to jump right into it. Yoink. Also, I've been having this weird thing where I start the video and then it jumps forward half the video. I don't know why it's been doing that, and it's kind of weird. So if that happens, well, bollocks. Oh, this is the beginning of Season 4. Dawn of the Dominions. Ooh. I have no idea what he means by Dominions in this context, because I don't know if that word has any meaning in 40K or Star Wars. Sounds like we're in a jungle planet, though, with the water. Sounds like water on leaves. Episode 45, The Light Flares. Doesn't it usually flare before it burns out? But we already had flickers. Oh, flickers, flares. Next episode fade.
Said the Inquisitor. One hand wrapped.
Oh, I think I noticed this. This is a different style. He's not just doing static images. He's doing 3D backgrounds over top of the images he's chosen, usually AI generated, for his various characters. Also, seeing this guy look more like a 90s, 80s style grunge hero is a bit weird.
Firmly around Hecate's chin and lower jaw, the other holding up a pen-like object which was rapidly flashing blue from one end. Hecate, who was sitting awkwardly on the side of the medical bed Samel had been occupying earlier, fidgeted and gnashed her teeth, her face creased with furious lines as she glared up at the blue light. Doesn't like being touched.
Hecate is a cat, confirmed. I'm sorry, it's just like everything they just said right now is literally taking one of my cats to the vet. It is actually disturbing how much this entire thing matches. Oh.
Hecate growled through her openly clenched teeth. Samel frowned, holding the blinking blue beam of light steady on her right red eye. He could not help but notice that shifting her face back from third was becoming more difficult each time it occurred. An existential issue, given that Hecate could not exist for prolonged periods in her third face.
Why?
Not without causing extensive damage to herself and anyone or thing too close to her.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of the point? Oh, because normally that would be the point, so it's not a problem, except he actively is not using her as an expendable piece. That's why. Sorry, I gotta remember Samel is an Inquisitor, but he's not the standard Inquisitor like Tar Weiler is. He's the other Weiler who somehow is a completely different person in every way, shape, or form, more than even 40K usually accounts for.
He lamented that she was becoming stronger to her own detriment, and his mimetic ploys would only work for so much longer if he did not figure something else out.
Oh. See, what Fan just did there is one of two things. Either he's setting up a future plot line with Hecate, or he's setting up a reason for the plot line to end. There's two ways that most normal writers would handle this. Either it's the giant Chekhov's gun of she has a limited amount of time, but she's getting stronger, so the power level we've seen with her can be escalated, but it'll come at the cost of whatever escalation it is, probably leading to the end of her character arc, or just her dying, which would probably be more or less the same. Or we go the other route and find Samel finding a way to stabilize her as some type of plot line. That could be the case. I would probably lean more towards the first one, the second one, just because of how fast the plot has been happening. Everything here has been within 48 hours, I think. I'm not even sure we've reached the 24-hour mark. I know we're close to it, but I'm not even sure we've passed it at this point. It's either just past it or still within 48 hours. So things are moving really fast. So a long-running plot line of figuring out how to stabilize her, maybe using some of the less Imperial elements and more remains of the Jedi elements, that could be a thing, but that would probably need a lot stretch, or, well, yeah, more stretches of time than we've seen Fan being willing to devote other than the first opening episodes. Or we're going into some kind of plotline with her of, well, burnout, but in a really glorious way. Just seeing that and seeing that kind of foreshadowing, that little setup to show how the character can change, is really cool, because as a writing major, this is just like sugar to me to see that.
Yeah? Well, I wouldn't have to if you would just hold still, heck. Samel growled right back.
Oddly enough, she's still listening to him, even in third phase.
For a few more seconds. The Inquisitor
Which means
ordered.
I would think she can get more control.
Don't like it. Don't. She continued growling before trailing off, starting to relax. Samel sighed in frank relief as the change back into her first face finally triggered. Her internal augmentations winding down, most of her mangled mind being resubmerged in the warm void of her mimetic training. It was not long after this that her luminous red eyes began to slowly change, first diluting into a light purple color, and then into a bright, shiny blue as the nanoparticulates within her irises returned to clinging to her nerve centers.
This is a stupid question, but if Fed is talking about nanoparticulates in there, did he mention what they did specifically? I mean, for all I know, it could just be a throwaway line that sounds cool, which is how most sci-fi treats anything to word nano. Yeah, and it's perfectly fine if you do. Sci-fi babble makes perfect sense. But I'm wondering if he has an internal reasoning of why that there. Could be. I mean, he's a pretty good writer, and he might actually have that written out. Or he could do what other writers do and just use it because it's fun.
Recharging themselves
Either
on
works.
her bioelectrical energy, she frowned and crossed her arms, staring into the light more steadily now, and once he determined that she was calm enough, the Inquisitor released her chin, Hecate puffing a long sigh from her nose, just as he did. I do not understand why any of this procedure is necessary. The woman seems more like a liability than an asset, remarked Tempestor Prime Cinder, who stood not far.
Okay, I did not take this guy after his previous displays of competence to be suicidal. But talking down to an oh, he might not know it's an Inquisitor. That might be it. Yeah, just because if he knows it's an Inquisitor and he's like, I think your decision is a liability to save the specific person, that sounds like a good way to not be in possession of a head much longer, or more specifically, have someone else in possession of it, which is usually worse. Whether he would do that. Samel would do that. I don't know. But other Inquisitors definitely would.
Far behind, all three of them yet lingering within Ishtara's shrine.
What she seems to you is none of my concern. And understanding why this must be done is none of your concern.
And people in chat
Do
say
you
he
have
knows.
Samael snapped, a heated spike rising in his chest.
He's insane.
Cinder nodded, face expressionless, as he
Cinder is either the most ballsy person in the room right now out of a bunch of other really crazy guys, or he is actually insane. Yeah, actually, no, considering the faction he's in, the level he's at, the things they're expected to do, insane might be a requirement.
He stepped forward and withdrew a gray bag composed of a tightly packed plastic. It had little white star designs across its exterior, and Cinder tossed it with one hand towards the large form of Samael.
Plastic?
Yes, Inquisitor. The Prime said as he did. Samael snatched it out of the air without looking back at either the bag or Cinder himself. Taking it with his now free hand, he flashed the blue light into Hecate's other eye, and when he was reassured that she was not going to slide back into her third face as soon as he turned around, he deactivated the small light and stowed it, tearing open the plastic pack and fishing out a wrapped, circular lump of hardened processed sugar, ice blue in color, and mounted on the end.
I get the sugar is because this is Hecate's vice that distracts her in the first phase, but also you got a pound of sugar in a bag from a illicit guy with guns, and it's a light blue. Is Cinder's name outside of his tag maybe Heisenberg by any chance? Because this feels like a Breaking Bad reference. In which case, nice. I mean, it is a vice that someone is getting off on. So it even counts. It's just, I wasn't expecting that reference of all things.
End of a tightly rolled paper straw.
Here.
Samael said, flicking it from his hand to her. Despite having shifted to her first face, Hecate still snatched the lollipop he had flicked at her out of the air with a speed Samael could not naturally match, tearing the plastic sheath from the head of the candy and stuffing it behind one cheek in the blink of an eye. Her frown became an impishly delighted smile, and Samael, satisfied, stood up and took a deep breath.
You know, this is probably a weird thing to only realize multiple episodes in, but this is the only description of candy I've ever heard of in any 40K medium, fan or official. I mean, of course it makes sense it would still exist because there's rich nobles who could eat anything they want, so one of them probably has the desire for candy. It's just weird that this is never really ever brought up, that they even have candy making facilities or have anyone eat it. Because when you talk about nobles, it's usually over-the-top gluttony along the lines of the 1800s, 1700s, and 1600s, like more Renaissance-era nobility, over-the-top powdered wigs and everything. It's such a weird thing for candy to stand out to me this way, because we've talked about it before, but I think Fan, as far as I know, is the only person to ever really mention that on the Imperium side.
Subduing the sudden wave of anxiety that struck him. The nervous and nearly fearful burst was not born of the situation which surrounded him. After all, he still had two potent agents on the outside, waiting for his signal. When the Inquisitor decided the time was right,
or have I missed
he and
them?
Hecate would break out of this place and vanish into Axum's planet-wide hive. And from there, he would work out a way to rejoin his forces.
Why does he
He
need
was
to break
also
out?
not
Because they're on a
nervous
death side,
about
yeah.
the exterminatus weapon that had been supposedly dropped onto Axum. For he would know by now if it had succeeded in detonating,
By being dead.
and it obviously had not.
Yeah.
What made Samael feel these emotions was something hidden from him.
Oh?
But he strongly suspected that they were a direct result of his new mechanical heart. Unlike a natural heart, his new eternal muscles did not beat or clench like his old ones had.
Oh?
Instead, His new heart hummed continuously in his chest, filtering his blood and pumping it mechanically and smoothly at a perfectly even pace throughout his body.
That sounds absolutely painful. Ugh. Mostly just because Fan added that sound effect. They're perfect timing on that, but just that little wobbly fan sound, just thinking about that internalizing your chest, always there constantly, it would almost feel more like an incredibly elevated heartbeat as opposed to a constant one.
Had he only one heart, this may have been able to neutralize most of his ability to even feel
So he did have
anxiety.
the two hearts, okay.
But
We knew that, though,
being
because
that
he got
had
stabbed through
two hearts, his second was available and willing to hammer and speed in his chest, sensing the disturbance, as did so many other internal systems of his body.
Sensing?
At least, this was what he attributed this
What?
all to, as he hastily withdrew a low stick from his jacket and
He did what?
many other internal systems of his body. At least, this was what he attributed this all to, as he hastily withdrew a low stick from his jacket and lit it with one of his many spare lighters. He took a deep drag.
Sensing
and
is a
exhaled it
very specific word
slowly,
choice.
savoring the effect.
Because he's addicted to cigarettes as his vice as much as Hecate is addicted to sugar as her vice. Still, though, the phrase sensing, in both 40K and Star Wars, that is a very specific choice of words. Now, the question is Fan using that as a red herring because it's a really good descriptive word and he's just playing around? Because honestly, it's still a great choice of word regardless of context. Or is he aware of the context and is explicitly using that to give information that we may or may not be aware of yet, that maybe he has the not quite Jedi, but plot relevant armor protection of not being fucked over by the Force? Technically, everything I said is a word salad of completely accurate information. I don't know, because I'm pretty sure he was explicitly non-Force sensitive, which is why I'm leaning more towards a word choice. But it's still one of those very particular word choices, though.
The low stick itself was far, far too mild to have any actual power over him, given his mostly Astartes biology. But, just like Hecate, he had programmed himself with a myriad of corrective mimetic treatments. And this was by far his most used, as he tasted the soot and smoke.
Mimetic treatments. Oh. Excuse me. Considering Fan is in the chat right now, and he said both are mimetically or mem programmed to be addicted to those things. So they're intentionally blocking themselves somehow. Oh. And that's... Hecate failed out of being an Eversor because she got psychic power and considered herself tainted. And she has a mimetic addiction to sugar, which we kind of have touched on here, and Fan confirmed. So that would also imply that Samel probably is somewhat psychic and is mimetically blocking it with the addiction to tobacco. In the same way she is blocking a lot of her, well, second and third faces with the addiction to sugar, probably. Huh. Okay. Makes perfect sense. And because he's an Inquisitor, or from an Inquisitor family, it also makes sense that he wouldn't immediately be sent to the dinner hall for the Emperor. If you get the reference, you get the reference. And if you don't, you really don't want to get into that.
Smoke of the oily burning weed of the low stick. Associations and Pavlovian pathways awoke within his mind, triggering the alterations he had hypnotized into his subconscious. The pain in his body, not just from the recent operation, but from his very nature, began to dissolve and vanish from his conscious thoughts, replaced by the heady taste and smell of the cigarette between his fingers. He leaned against the wall, resting his head in his hand and taking another long drag as he did, sighing smoke as relief began to circulate through his mutant body. Inquisitor...
What? What?
smoke as relief began to circulate through his mutant body.
Is he talking mutant as in talking down about modifications by being a failed Astartes, or are we going more on actually a psyker because that's a form of mutation? I do not know which way Fan is going because in the chat he's being cagey saying he is definitely blocking something, which means he's just sitting on the keyboard laughing. And I gotta say, God damn you, you perfectly earned that, you son of a accurate bitch. I'm not jelly at all.
Inquisitor Weiler asked a man's voice, a voice that did not belong to Cinder. Samel turned his head slightly to look towards the entrance of the room, and standing there was the shape of Saint Lazarus.
Shape of?
The man seemed almost timid, despite his vestments and armor, and of course,
he actually has vestments
his soldier's bearing. Samel recognized that reaction well,
before.
sighing and dragging on his glow stick one more time, burning it nearly down to the stump before flicking the rest away into...
I just realized the irony here. The Inquisitor is saying that the Saint looks apprehensive or bashful or whatever. I'm just looking at this going, yeah, that's because Lazarus is not insane. He's terminally okay with doing the insane Imperium stuff, but, you know, you talk to an Inquisitor at your own risk. Unlike the Tempestor Prime, who really I am now questioning the sanity of. I think Lazarus' reaction does not matter what position you have. There are things Inquisitors do that you do not ever want to piss off. Even the nice ones. Especially the nice ones, because the nice ones probably have way more of a repertoire of what they haven't decided to do yet, but they know, because they've seen other people do it. Because when you get into a habit of doing horrible, evil stuff, you kind of fall into a rut. But when you haven't done it, you get to see all the horrible, shocking things. You know exactly how bad it is.
...to a brazier and turning to fully face the new saint. "Approach, Saint Lazarus,"
Love the background music
said
too.
the Inquisitor, instantly noting how Lazarus untensed, particularly with his title being spoken, and thus affirmed. "We have made a decision on the ceasefire," the saint said.
Oh, they actually did.
Attention flowing beneath his words that suggested to Weiler.
Oh, I was not expecting
that.
that.
Not
Like,
merely
in the next
settling
12
with the
hours.
safe option of martyrs' deaths.
You have decided to attend the ceasefire negotiation.
More than I
Samel
expected.
guessed, though his voice stated it as though it were a fact, almost an accusation. And the former sergeant made Major tensed once more and nearly stepped back. "How did you..." Lazarus began to say.
You wouldn't announce it otherwise.
It is your place to lead the faithful, St. Lazarus. It is my place to know them.
The Inquisitor claimed with all the certainty and graveness of a man who was not bluffing, and the saint nodded, momentarily awed and reminded of the power of the Inquisition. With that,
Smart man.
Samel recalled how unexpectedly easy it was to convince nearly anyone that he was an all-knowing agent of the throne. All he needed to do was offer a ploy, a trick, a petty contrivance or twist of phrase, and the reputation of the organization did the rest.
I hate how much everything Fan just wrote there is completely accurate to reality. If you can tell person A, B, or C one truth about themselves, they will believe you. The best part is, if you tell the exact same truth and make it generic enough to every person, they will find a reason usually to make it accurate. In this case, deductive reasoning could probably more or less say why the saint was here, why Lazarus would tell him in the first place. You don't announce, hey, we're going to do exactly what we already planned to do. The only reason you bring it up to the Inquisitor is because you're not doing the initial plan, so there's only one reason to be there. But Samel is right. If you do one little thing to make it look like you know everything, everyone will assume you know everything. Because that's how our minds work. We jump to conclusions really hard. It's also why a lot of scams work, because people jump to conclusions about someone knowing everything, even though they have no idea what they're talking about based on a small bit of information. Yeah. Fan has it completely right, though.
But, of course, Samel was far from that, and his follow-up, spoken so naturally as to hide its hypocrisy, was the subtle evidence of that.
Explain yourself then, Saint. Tell me, in your own words, why you think this is the right decision.
And the best part is, if we were getting this from Lazarus' perspective, it would look like he's being grilled on justifying not fighting to the death. Where on Samuel's side, we can hear that he is still justifying himself why he is not deciding to fight to the death, but he's also giving him a chance to explain it to this guy so he understands the thought process and maybe sees the value or lack of value in it. It's just kind of cool how you get more information from this side. It's also why most people will not write from the character's perspective who's very inquisitive, or in this case, an inquisitor, because you have to keep track of so many more lines of thought. It's annoying how many. It's why ignorant characters are the easiest to write, because they don't need to know the truth. You can just see what they see, understand it as they understand it. And if you decide to do something different later, it's not that you completely fucked up the storyline. It's that the character had a flawed understanding. I keep coming back to this in multiple, almost every video I've done in this series. But this is a really good example of fan doing something that's admittedly harder, because this is a character perspective that does require a lot more. This is the truth as I see it, that has to be true unless big things change later.
Samel said, using a dangerous but neutral voice, a voice which suggested much, but promised nothing.
So
straightening like a rod as the intended effect of the ploy struck him, Lazarus began to cautiously but firmly explain his plan, his reasoning, and his need for Samel himself. And the Inquisitor had to admit he was intrigued.
Oh. And Fan is specifically not telling us what the plan is. Oh. Thought he would stop doing this. He did this early on where he had individual words fading in. I hate this with a passion. This is more just a design choice. Some people like it. It's probably fine. It's not a huge issue. This is on a me personal level. I hate individual letters, an entire word fading in. I'd rather go by line or full words as you would read it, because it always feels like you're like Lord Admira. It's an annoyance. Not a problem. It's just something I personally do not like design-wise. I thought he'd not done that anymore, but no. Lord Admiral Rolla. It's only because I saw him DO meme prior to this, but I'm trying so hard not to say Road right before her name every time. Unless her first name actually is Rhode. That is actually a name. Like Rhodes. Like Rhode Island. Rhodes, and I think in Greece. It's a thing. Oh god, idiot. I'm not going to ask in case Fan chimes in that is exactly her first name.
Damn demons!
The Lord Admiral bellowed, eyes wide and filled with the semblance of fire, a reflection of her own burning ships, discharging their rending weapons to the void, each surrounded by a shimmering shoal of Republic ships.
Have shield fleets Primaris and Secundus merge into one force and provide interdiction cover for the Born on Death! Now!
Rolla's Endurance screamed from her command throne, her left hand rapidly typing away at her armrest-mounted input console. Her head ached terribly, her internal mental cogitators forcibly splitting her mind into as many simultaneous processes as she could manage. Hands and voice struggling to send out enough orders to counteract her numerous foes. The effort made the lines on her face tighten and deepen, and her rage spark all the brighter as she suffered through the effects needed to keep pace. Though she was unsure she could even say that much, the enemy were fighting her almost like Tyranids would.
Oh, that actually makes perfect sense. Sorry, this is one of those moments where the comparison between universes actually is shockingly perfect. Because Omega on the other side is fighting them as a hive mind of people all the other people in her cohort. And mostly her giving out orders from a central command hub with her as the dominating intelligence. Which is exactly how the Tyranids fight. It's actually a perfect literal analogy. Except it's not even an analogy because it's literally perfect. It's like saying the hose is hose-like. The only difference here is how it's being received is through telecommunications as opposed to psychic power. But that's literally the extent of it. It's actually a perfect analogy.
Swarms of arrowhead escorts acting like a single
Also,
large entity more
I love the art
often
fans
than
using
not.
I know Fan is using AI art on this. I don't mind because he's using it in a way that actually looks very effective.
Immune to routing or intimidation, without being able to drive the enemy off or manipulate their crowd psychology, and with the Republic being so openly willing to eat any losses as long as it meant keeping her pressed and suffocating, Rolo was being corralled down to a battle of raw angles and numbers, and forcing her into inevitable positions that were gradually wearing everything down.
Target their swarm clusters and switch to area munitions immediately. Battleship Master of Stars, you are to take lead of the frontal assault.
She tapped out with her hard, artificial fingers. Her eyes moved back up to the hololithic displays, glossy orbs reflecting the ill portents being projected there, each displayed in green luminescence that flickered with each shake and rumble of her besieged ship. Orla's eyes flicked down to the console at her left then, scanning it, reading each line in a flash as more responses came in.
Understood, my Lord Admiral.
Okay, one, that's creepy. Two, the sound effect he's using in the background, not just the small beepings, but like that low whirring ullination going up and down just at a low level. It's off-putting in the extreme and sounds really weird on headphones, but it does really hammer in that running aesthetic of a battleship bridge from the Imperium side where there's a bunch of beeps and boops and sounds that you don't really understand what's going on, but it feels technological, which is a lot of what 40K tech is.
Master of Stars, now engaging the front with full battery macro salvos.
This is the Resplendent Doom reporting. We are sustaining heavy fire from multiple vectors. The coordination is unprecedented. Our maneuvering thrusters are crippled. We cannot...
Cyborg Elvis. Okay, was not expecting that.
Not contend for much longer without support.
The Lord Admiral of the Zektek sector grit her teeth, nostrils flaring as she absorbed the reports.
Acknowledged, Captain Valigator. Contacting nearby cruisers. I need concentrated fire over the Resplendent Doom's sunward flank. Break their encirclement by giving the Doom a wall to grind them against. Born on death. Support the Resplendent Doom's sunless flank. Scatter them.
The Lord Admiral sent rapidly, and all the while, transmissions around her bombarded her with even more, her eyes bobbing up and swiveling. With reluctance, she shunted off a quarter of the reports to her sub-commanders, letting them sort and handle whatever may come from them, having strict orders to only send back reports that needed her absolute attention.
I mean, we've already seen Rola, whatever, is a very competent admiral when she's directly commanding, but this is probably the biggest example I've seen of her actual command competence beyond what she's directly involved in. Most people in science fiction do not ever delegate, so it's kind of seeing that is really neat.
She would have wanted to trust them with these tasks more as the void raged around them, but doing so cost her time, and she was dancing on seconds as it was. No time could be spared. A man appeared then. Not a real man, but the reflection of one, a hololith manifesting right before her eyes.
Gorst reporting. Vengeance class cruiser moving to answer
Tech
the
priest,
call.
probably.
The swarms will break. Give us 30 seconds.
Reported the hazy, emerald phantom of Admiral Gorst. Rola nodded, eyes moving up past him.
Oh, that's not a tech priest if he's an admiral then. I guess he's very heavily augmented.
And looking into the other hololiths and the void beyond them. Out in the burning black, through the blistering displays of flashing lights and murdered metal of every variety, the vast, grand cruiser known as the Resplendent Doom was being lit ablaze. Its colossal body surrounded on all sides by persistent Republic arrowheads. and clouds of strike craft. The breaking behemoth moaned inaudibly into the vacuum of space, bleeding from a million glowing cuts as the Republic wolves at all sides brayed for its death in continued colored streams and bolts of superheated plasma. Then, like a wall of light, or the very hand of the cosmic emperor of mankind himself, a stream of energy and munitions composed of macro cannons and lance discharges lit space like a divine river of resplendent death, nearly scorching the side of the resplendent Doom and eradicating every Republic ship on that flank. The Doom did not miss a beat. Barely functioning retro thrusters and maneuvering jets spitting and coughing to life, beginning to move the Imperial battleship into a leisurely twirl, spinning and dragging the Republic vessels which had invisibly anchored themselves to it via tractor beams. Those too slow or inept to disengage found themselves torn to pieces in the obliterating wall of Imperial support fire. And yet, escape proved more difficult than even those quick reflexes could compensate for. Something which was revealed as the Republic ships which had managed to avoid this fate fell victim to one just as hideous, finding themselves targeted by various weapons under the command of Admiral Gorst. The grim man smiled from the darkened, sparking bridge of his own flagship.
Huh. Now, this is interesting. We got Rola's scene building her up, and we're switching into another perspective to get Gorst here. Between the voice and the AI art fan chose, showing the incredibly enhanced mechanical nature, and the very distorted voice that he's intentionally using there. And it almost feels like we're getting someone built up as an antagonist side, considering all the things that are there. Saying a specifically bad fate from this guy is highlighting that he might be more ruthless than some of the others.
Scarred face cut with his subtle, gleaming grin. Every murdered Republic arrowhead fed him like a beast built and bred on the death of tens of thousands.
So a standard admiral.
Only moments later, that grin died, along with the admiral who had borne it. Multiple Y-wing attack bombers had converged on him, quick engines and small shapes appearing as if from nowhere. Proton torpedoes struck,
were they jumping
overwhelming
in?
already weakened void shields and collapsing the canopy of Gorst's bridge. The Breaker of Heretics survived its own decapitation, but only physically. Now drifting, a dead body in the void, a prison for 100,000 screaming souls. Back on board Rola's ship, the green ghost of the grinning admiral vanished, snuffed like a candle in the dark.
So Fan was making him stand out more before killing him off. Oh. It's kind of weird to switch into his perspective to see that, rather than just watch her and perceive the smile on his end, though. Odd choice, but not a big issue. Unless Fan is going to say that he's alive later after the battle is over and somehow, because of his prosthetics, he's recovered and gets the Grievous treatment. Which may or may not be a thing, but that seems like a kind of a stretch for someone we've only got a few seconds of. Fan could do it, but that would be a much more long-running plotline.
Never again to be lit. Contact with Admiral Gorst has been lost, reported one of the communications officers. The Lord Admiral grit her teeth, rage seizing in her chest, tears of anger gathering in her eyes. For she could not take a moment to mourn, not even to slam her fist in anger against her chair. She could do nothing but continue issuing orders, continue to stumble after this collapse of an assault, continue to pray to the God Emperor for some escape from this downward spiral. And less than 15 minutes.
Yep, that's why. Praying for escape, because from her estimation, they can kill and kill and kill, because she doesn't know that's the entire fleet she's fighting. Because on their end, they don't have replacement facilities. Every loss for now is irreplaceable. And they just lost an admiral who they probably don't have an infinite amount of, considering they're not in their home galaxy. Granted, she also doesn't realize that she's literally fighting everything at the moment, so if she had a decisive victory here, they would probably have leeway to make replacements by taking over facilities and building up. Granted, the same calculus would still be the case that the Star Wars side could respond faster and just destroy whatever facilities they build up. But that's not really going to matter.
From the end of her hour, Rolla's prayers were answered in the voice of the machine god. Flickering to life as suddenly as Gorst had been taken from it, a new, massive hololith appeared before her, swallowing her view and dominating it with the insectoid lensed face of Archmagos Lesat Gamma.
That is a thing.
Archmagos?
Rolla began to say,
Oh, that's from Brush Ray? I have no idea what that is. That is also really disturbing to look at.
but barely got the word out before the binaural drone of the venerable tech priest filled the room.
Central command juncture located. Certainty at 87.7%.
Oh, yeah, because they sent the assassin.
Communications interdiction at location in 250 seconds.
He communicated to her across the bridge, Vox Howlers. Many cringed and winced at the harsh stream of sound, but the expression on Rolla's sweat-streaked face was anything but pained, a white grin slicing across her otherwise grim features.
Send me the coordinates for this central command juncture.
Rolla ordered the Archmagos, even as her eyes slid away and landed on her communications officer.
Get me a secure line. Full priority channel to the murder-class cruiser Vengeful Sun. Go!
She snapped, the officer turning down to his console and beginning the process of doing as she had ordered.
Coordinates are sent.
The huge holographic tech priest murmured in his logic tongue, and not a second later, the communications officer raised a thumbs up. The Vengeful Sun is on Vox. Connection is secure, he reported.
Good. You have my thanks, Archmagos.
Rolla said before pressing a key on her control console that dismissed his image before he could even respond. The inhuman.
So that's why I was a little surprised. It looks like the orders to take out the command and control section, Omega, came, and then we're getting the report on it now. I thought maybe I just missed something, which is also still entirely possible. It seems like it was effect then cause is being reported.
Human shape of the tech priest replaced by the far more recognizable form of Captain Samson Lucenter. Tall, darkly dressed and wearing black shaded glasses over his missing and now bionic eyes.
Really, fan? I'm sorry. It's just between the art and the fact that you're saying you got a blind man wearing glasses going full. Well, I forgot the singer-songwriter's name. Ray Charles? Yeah, I think you went full Ray Charles. And this guy, like, blind man, dark glasses over his eyes. I mean, they're bionic, so he technically still has them. But details, I just... Wow, that is, actually, considering some of the art pictures of nobles in 40K, might actually be considered understated.
The holographic captain watched her from beneath the brim of his sharp naval cap. Lord Admiral, he said simply, standing somewhat at attention, but offering
no
more
mechanical
honors than
effects.
that.
Captain Lucenter, I have you on a completely secure line. No one outside of my bridge or yours can hear or see anything we are discussing.
Rolla said quickly. An interesting thing to mention, responded the captain, undaunted and unchanged.
I mention it, Captain, because I am distinctly aware of the fact that you are either working for the Inquisition or you are a direct member of it.
Snapped the Lord
Oh,
Admiral.
she would be aware of that.
Lord Admiral Sindurin, I do not know, the captain began, as casual.
Oh, it's Rolla Sindurin. Rolla was the first name. Oh, there goes the chance that her first name was Road Rolla. Just a little disappointed right now.
As reciting a well-rehearsed script, but Rolla was not contacting him to hear auditions for a play.
I am also aware of the fact that your murder-class cruiser is the fastest cruiser in the Zektek sector. And rest assured, Captain, that I do not for even a single second believe that this is a coincidence.
Rolla pressed on. And why, theoretically, would any of that be relevant to you, Lord Admiral?
Because you need a fast
He
attack
asked,
craft.
tilting his head to the side ever so slightly.
It is relevant because I just got the coordinates of the Central Intelligence that the Republic is using to facilitate its fleet actions. Coordinates I am sending now.
She told him, turning to the side and nodding to her comms officer, who nodded back and sent them. A second later, Captain Lucenter tilted his own head, looking away from the Lord Admiral briefly, studying something on his own ship, before his eyes returned to her, and he nodded. It is in the Emperor's hands now,
What?
Lord Rolla. Faith is rewarded, he responded enigmatically.
Is that a yes or a no from
And
him?
the Emperor protects.
Rolla concluded. He nodded again before vanishing. The Emperor protects.
And the Space Marines shoot. Oh, we're still gonna do this individual letter phase-in, aren't we? Although I will admit, I fully love the fact that in the background, the image fan is using is stock footage of someone changing the page on a book, considering it's a story. Just that is incredibly cool as far as I'm concerned. It's a little detail that's not too important, but I just love seeing it.
Lazarus found him standing outside, staring up into the sky with a hollow expression.
So the shooting has
Saint
stopped?
sighed
Or are they in
heavily,
the protected
feeling
section?
the emotional weight of yet another burden settle onto the space of his shoulders. Forgive me, soldier, he thought to himself, gritting his teeth behind tight lips and moving forward to stand beside the recently interrogated guardsman. Farness did not seem to notice, arms limp at his side as he stared up at the dying hues of the sky, letting some light in through the empty portals of his colorless eyes. Small shocks of white poked out from the sloppy mane of his unkempt hair, which rustled gently in the wind, his helmet held limply in his left hand. A telling, dire breath from Farness revealed to Lazarus that the young man was aware of his presence, but for whatever
White hair.
reasons still existed in his slowly mending mind, the Vestellan irregular said nothing, did not
Oh, because he was being interrogated. Yeah. I forgot about that. Also, Fen has been using a lot of repeating sections of background. I don't mind them, but honestly, I feel he would do well just slowing them down to let them play at a lower speed. As long as he doesn't look stuttery.
even move his eyes away from the empty fixed point in the white and blue sky above them, save for the subtle trembling which possessed each of his eyes. Subtle though it was, Lazarus noticed it, and knew it for what it was. The smallest surface ripple on a storm of broken psyche which was likely spinning and hastily reassembling itself. Time was needed for those things to settle down. Time was needed for healing to fully take place.
And that's interrogation on top
But
of
time
everything
was
prior
not a
to that.
commodity that Lazarus had in any great amount.
'Cause he had the mental
Relying
breakdown with
more on
Ahsoka.
instinct than experience, the recently sainted sergeant placed a firm metal hand onto Farness's shoulder, squeezing it, and by that, grounding the younger man. "You lost nearly your whole squad," Lazarus stated, another sharp
Does he
breath
know there's any
hissing
survivors left
into
at all?
Farness's lungs. "You watched your sergeant die, took wounds, took losses. And at the end of it, the Republic went so far as to crash a void ship on top of you.
Yeah.
You had to endure capture, endure the capture of your comrade, endure the shame and pain of helplessness."
You know, considering you're trying to help him right now, Lazarus, you're doing a really good job at just saying, hey, don't worry. You done fucked up. I mean, dear God, man. This is like going up to a guy on a bridge and saying, I hear it's nice at the bottom. Why?
And then,
To be fair, he's a
after
sergeant,
making
not
it
a
out of all of
therapist.
that, after arriving back with us,
Oh, God.
you again were forced through another extremely trying struggle. The saint continued, hand firm on the soldier's shoulder. "I could have spared you from it, but I had to be sure. And for that necessity, I am sorry," Lazarus admitted. And he meant it too. For a moment, the effects of his words seemed muted. But then, Farness broke the trend, looking at Lazarus and shaking his head. "No, said the young man.
Looks even younger in that
quirked his
picture.
eyebrows. No, he parroted. No, I... Farness mumbled, seeming to mentally stumble for a few moments before beginning to regain his footing. That isn't... What I mean to say, sir, is that I understand. I understand why that had to happen. He finally managed to explain, though the explanation did little for Lazarus. The new saint squinted his eyes at the younger man, still seeing in him something that his voiced acceptance did not signal. Shaking his head, Lazarus squeezed the guardsman's shoulder with his metal hand one more time. I'll make sure this wasn't for nothing. I'll get us out of here. Mankind must suffer, so that, Lazarus began to say, so that we can survive. Farness finished for him. I know that. I made a promise to a comrade, a vow. I swore that there were things which I saw her do, things which I would not repeat. Heresies
And
to the machine
he
cults,
did.
but not sins in the eyes of the God Emperor.
So he's specifically torn up about the fact that he talked about her just jumping into the mech without going through the trials and making it work, which is also the reason they are prioritizing getting her back, because what he doesn't understand is he is telling them, oh, by the way, we have a 1 in multiple trillion person here who the Imperium, who the God Emperor himself has made a point to save. Because during the Crusades, Titan pilots were more common, to the point where they would still make a point to find people because they were heavily reliant then. And even now, when it's not that common after the Crusades, 40K instead of 30K, you're basically saying, hey, by the way, we have the most important person in the entire Zectec sector right here, or one of them, because they're a freaking Titan pilot. A natural Titan pilot. God, I love this. He's agonizing over telling them the best news they've ever heard, probably in their entire lives.
Explained, his eyes still distant, still hollow in their distinct way. She was strong enough to do the impossible. And all she asked of me is that I keep her secret. And I couldn't even do that. I failed my vow. And now, even if we do get her back, she may be interrogated like I was, or executed for what she managed to do, or worse.
She
Lazarus
dominated a
watched Farness
night
silently
without
as he
any
spoke.
prior
Pieces slowly clicked
introductory
into place as he
period.
remembered the Magos' sudden change in demeanor, and her insistence that he do what the Republic asked in order to retrieve
I think he
Nerva
understands.
Sharp. Was it possible
Nerva's a big
that she was
bargaining
being
piece.
retrieved only to be destroyed?
No.
Odd as it was, Lazarus knew better than to put such a possibility beyond the capacity or schemes of the Adeptus
Could they?
Mechanicus.
Yes. Are they?
He shook
Nope.
his head. You are coming with us, Lazarus stated, the words shocking Farness from his torpor and prompting him to swing his head back to fully stare at the saint. What? Farness stuttered.
Wait, he's actually going?
You heard me, soldier. This whole operation is only happening because of you, so you are going to see it through. In fact, I can't think of anyone better to supervise the prisoner exchange.
That actually makes perfect sense, because he already has some level of rapport with the other side. Also, in the chat, Arthur Camo mentioned there was a knight that Nerva was piloting. Yeah, she was. But because she was specifically highlighted by the controlling intelligence of the knight to realize what she was, because she could do everything immediately without dying, it understood that she was a pilot well beyond what a normal knight would have. And that's also why a few other things Fan has confirmed that, yeah, no, she's a pilot who could run a Titan. Yeah, a Titan. So just surviving a night is important. Being able to jump in and survive running it immediately without any of the workup period is something a Titan pilot can do. And they're so incredibly rare.
And to ensure
There are
they're
probably
taken
more
care of
psychers than
once
natural Titan
retrieved,
pilots.
Lazarus said, firming his jaw. But why? Farness began to ask, only to be cut off by the Saint in a pointed way.
He's the
Are
leading
you
diplomat.
questioning my command, Guardsman Eliton? Lazarus asked, expression lining with a scowl as his sergeant's demeanor consumed him for a brief instant. Farness remembered himself all at once and snapped back to old instincts. He saluted and shook his head. No, sir, he said loudly.
I love this.
Then tell me this and tell me straight. If I give you the authority and force to do so, do you think you could stand against the insistence of a tech priest Magos fervently enough to keep all of the prisoners safe while they are in my custody?
Oh. So it wasn't just him thinking that the tech priests would do their own bullshit, which, yeah, but planning against it. But by doing this, he's also giving Farness a goal to make him feel like he's not betraying Nerva again.
Asked the Imperial Saint. Farness barely hesitated as the meaning behind it all sank in. Face turning rosy as his expression set into a determined affirmation, he nodded sharply. Sir, yes I can, sir! Was his response. Good. That is what the Emperor needs to hear from his shield and hammer. Give me one moment, said Saint Lazarus.
I love this
turning
entire
away
section.
and withdrawing a vox bead from his pocket, placing it into his ear before beginning to speak again. Prime, are you available? Good. Meet me.
This entire section is playing with something that I absolutely adore in writing. And Fan is doing it beautifully. He's taking multiple levels of understanding by different characters at different levels and weaving together the narrative so they can crosstalk without actually understanding what's going on to move the narrative forward in a cohesive way without tripping over himself. For example, the overall meta-narrative is they're coming to a peace agreement and they're trying to get back Nerva because she has the potential to become a Titan pilot. That's what the Mechanicus knows, but they haven't said. Farness knows that he betrayed her and is now getting a lifeline from St. Lazarus to protect her against the tech priest when they get her back, but also is being brought forward so he's not stewing in here. So from his side, he just knows that he failed to keep her secret, but everything else had to happen. So he's broken and guilting himself for the one thing that no one else is going to guilt him for. And then there's Lazarus, who doesn't really know quite what the tech priests are going to do, but he knows they're planning something. For all I know, maybe they are going to do something stupid because they're a renegade faction. I don't know. It doesn't look like that so far, but he's plotting for it, but also using that not certainty as a way to give Farness comfort. So he's working on that principle of something's going on up here at the top line with Nerva. And Farness just comforting him in his own way possible by giving him some utility, but also using him in such a way that in case things do go bad at the top side, he can help with someone on the bottom side by actually making them useful and not just a usable point. These are all different perspectives with different understandings of exactly what's going on. No single person here actually has the full picture, but they're acting on what their knowledge would be. And Fan is not tripping it up because that is the biggest thing. Most people, when they have this going down, they understand the big picture and do not then filter it down to individual understandings. Seeing that here is so freaking good, and it's happening so fast. It's just really good to see that. A lot of the time, what you would see this failed as is, this is the truth. This is the truth everyone understands, and everyone acts on it because it's the truth. And when you filter into a perspective, it's their reflection on the truth everyone else understands. And that's it. But people are weird. For similar is something as the sky is blue. When you filter it down, the sky is blue, but when described through their eyes, it looks red because maybe they're colorblind and they don't know it. But they've been talking about it the entire time as if it's blue because they think they're working on the truth, but it's not. It's that little difference that I absolutely love. And this is such a good little way to show the conflicting information levels, but how they're still meshing because of that and interacting and making decisions based on it. I could geek out over this on an English major level for a long time, and I probably will.
Just outside the front. And bring Velix with you, he said,
Velix?
Speaking through the bead.
I wonder if I remember that
Shortly
character.
thereafter, Tempestor Prime Cinder emerged from the Basilica, another soldier in tow, a woman who, despite her prim uniform and precise military bearing, had no weapon, not even a sidearm.
I didn't know this was a crossover with Xeon. Need to be said.
She had bright blonde hair, which she kept short and out of her vision, tucked under a stormtrooper's beret, and light brown eyes beneath it all. They both stopped before the Saint and saluted just as sharply as Farness had. At ease, he said, waving their salutes down. Velix, Lazarus added, fixing the woman with a hard stare.
Saint Lazarus,
she said in return, holding her hands behind her back and her feet wide in a parade rest. Lazarus noted that she was not using any of his military titles, and more than that, the former captain seemed perfectly professional, neither too at ease nor too rigid, her eyes filled with neither loyalty nor hostility, merely obedience. Will you take my orders? The former sergeant asked firmly. Her answer came as a sharp nod. Good. Private Leeton here is going to be in charge of the prisoner exchange, and afterwards, I am delegating the task of safeguarding them to him. You are to aid him in these endeavors, and any others he requests for the duration of his assignment, or until otherwise noted by myself or Tempestor Prime Cinder. Is that directive clear? Lazarus asked, treating her like a rank private standing in his squad line. She took it in stride.
Because technically the highest level he was at prior to all this in the last 24 hours was Sergeant, and he's treating it like so.
Nodding sharply once more.
Because he was a major.
Crystal clear,
Saint.
sir.
She voiced as she did. Outstanding. Go now and begin preparing yourself and Private Leeton for this task. Make sure you have the required force needed to keep all returned prisoners within our custody,
Keep forgetting Farness's last name is
even
Leeton.
from an ally force. The Saint concluded, Sheriff Velix nodding again, saluting, and then turning towards Farness, who stood at their side.
Twice now he's mentioned allied force. We know from his perspective he's assuming Mechanicus bullshit. I'm wondering, though, if Fan might pull some kind of other bullshit with random, say, Inquisitor who just happened to be beaten down by an old man doing something stupid.
He seemed quite shocked by what he had just observed, but was not given a lot of time to reflect on it.
Let us go. We must prepare an escort force and medical team.
Said Shara, and, flinching somewhat, Farness nodded.
Right, yeah. After you.
The guardsman said, and together they departed back into the basilica. Lazarus and Cinder watched them leave for a few moments before Cinder turned his head to look at the other man.
Also, just going off a comment Fan has made in the chat right now live, he said Velix was the officer the commissar, oh yeah, that guy, tried to replace her with. Oh yeah, when I think he was telling Lazarus to stand down, he was going to put Velix in charge, which means she's probably more on payroll of the guy whose name I made a point to already forget. And I'm definitely not going to make a point to remember now because I don't want to. Someone who surprisingly lived. I'm still disappointed about that.
Though he said nothing, waiting for orders or for a dismissal. Prime Cinder, how is the contingency coming along? Asked Lazarus, eyes still fixed on the back of the
Contingency?
two departing soldiers.
We have very few men.
Cinder
In case
replied.
the
On top
talks
of that,
break down.
most of
course,
our
yeah.
heavy fire support was crushed under the Republic void ship when it landed.
So they did a
He
good
went
job
on,
then.
But not your fleet of Tarok's troop transports, right? Lazarus pressed
Oh,
and Cinder
God.
grimaced, but shook his head.
No, most of them are still intact and within the basilica walls.
Cinder confirmed.
So you have a bunch of
and
tow
with
trucks.
only the few hundred men that we have, we should be able to load them all up, right? The Saint
Fancy
went on,
jeeps.
and again, Cinder was forced to acquiesce with a nod. Then it will have to do, said Lazarus with a sigh, rubbing his eyes.
There is no guarantee that this will work.
Nope.
Cinder reminded the Saint, and the
But the
former
alternative is
sergeant
guaranteed
nodded.
death, so...
There never is, he groaned. But we have to punish them. Lazarus added, his back straightening and expression firming, drawing his hand away from his face.
We have to punish them. Who exactly is he talking about? I'm assuming the Star Wars side, if they decide not to be honorable. But this is also the Imperium. It could be even if they decide to be honorable about it. And considering who's in charge of the Star Wars side right now, with Obi-Wan out of commission and Ahsoka doing her own thing, this is very much a we're making peace on behalf of nobody. Yeah, so essentially early rebellion.
We have to ensure that if they do betray us, if they do try to trick us when we deal with them in good faith, that they either die or live to deeply regret it.
It's not a bad move regardless. Admiral Spikes. Oh, back to the Star Wars side. I keep wanting to say the Imperium side because it's not the
Everyone
Empire yet,
around
though.
him was shocked, confused, and
spaceship.
quietly horrified. But he was not. He could not be, for Admiral Spikes was dead to novelty and unimpressed by power. And the moment he had come to understand that the
forgot what they were
Oracle
doing prior
command
to this.
system was all linked through a single ship, he had known that, eventually, whether in this battle or in the next, the Imperials would realize it and would target it.
Yeah.
And he knew that if they succeeded, this would happen. The
So he was
previously
expecting this.
coordinated mobs of the Republic starships suddenly halted mid-maneuvers, floundering in space as if concussed and unconscious. Spikes watched, hands behind his back, sparks flying from the partially shattered cabin of his bridge, reflecting off the glossy
Partially
visor of his
shattered.
helmet. He
Oh.
said nothing, did nothing, besides watch the hologram before him, watch the blue candles beginning to be snuffed out en masse by the blazing torches they were made to contend with. And in his mind, he counted down.
To
he had
what?
been preparing for this potential outcome, and one thing he had been forced to reckon with early.
He's planning on seizing command now that the main command is out of power. Or contact, take your pick. Might actually be out of power physically as well, for all we know. Which makes sense, and I thought they were hyperspacing this instruction to a relay note. I didn't realize it was actually just a single ship in the battle itself. That's kind of a liability.
Early in the process was the fact that if he acted too early, before the need was evident, then he would have no implicit authority with which
So
to
he's
take
letting enough people
command,
die to realize
even
they
from
need
now
the order.
mute Oracle. And so, teeth clenched, face hidden, Spikes waited, his hands balling into fists behind his back. His right arm came forward, a single digit lowering slowly over a communications key, which was blinking blue, primed ahead of this moment for his use. He waited, and then took a breath, pressing the luminous key. Right
How many other
away, his bridge was
contingencies do you
filled
have?
with the voices of countless panicking, frustrated, or dying authorities, all vying for some measure of control over the comms. The cacophony they created did nothing but jam everything up, but unlike them, he was prepared already. Spikes nodded to his comms officer, and the man nodded back, twisting a dial on the console before him and amplifying the volume of Spike's communicator, but not on Spike's end.
This is Admiral Spikes of the Victory Fleet. Clear the comms and prepare to receive orders.
I saw this image earlier. This is probably the funnest image I've ever seen because it still has him in the armor, just the helmet alone. But the rest is completely dressed down, Admiral level, including taking off gloves or anything. I kind of love this.
He said, neither raising his voice or inflicting anger into his demand. But thanks to the alterations his comms officer had just made, Spike's
Overriding.
voice boomed through the network of admirals and captains, drowning out even their sudden cries of shock and surprise in the loudness of the communication.
I defeated an Imperial force before, and I can do so again.
Spikes preempted.
It's a
his
good
voice
reason.
Coming down to a more normal level.
Although defeated is,
gratified by the fact that no one interrupted him.
It's a stretch.
The clone admiral.
But it's a
did
closer
not
stretch than anyone else can make.
All starships, fall back into your original battle groups. Break off from your current attack patterns, but ensure your retreat vectors are aligned with the angle of an Imperial starship. One or more. Make sure that to fire on
I think my stuff just froze.
a ship, one or more.
Hold.
Sure that
Nope,
to
it's just
fire on
the
us is
ninja
to
background
risk
that froze.
friendly casualties.
A distinct, cold voice cut in across
Oh?
the comms, and Spikes knew at once that it was the dismissive tenor of Admiral Tarkin. Belay those orders?
Did Tarkin always have a patch? Did he get like a replacement eye later? Or is this just Fan doing something I've missed in the background?
We have them on the retreat. Resume your previous attack patterns and press them
Seriously,
hard.
Tarkin?
Give no quarter, even onto the last man.
Spikes clenched his teeth from behind his lips.
And further proof that Tarkin is an overrated idiot. To be fair, canonically, his entire thing was he's vicious enough to the people under him that he could steal the work from people smarter than him, who were not nearly as vicious at stealing other people's work. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Rogue One. He's ruthlessly competent, but more on the ruthless than the competent.
His straight posture failing to betray the sudden anger that filled him, the only exterior sign of it being his gloved, creaking, clenched fist.
Admiral Tarkin, we cannot sustain these losses, and we cannot resume those attack patterns until the Oracle comes online. There is no time for debate. We have already created a large debris field to cover us at a
On the
distance.
run is not exactly accurate.
Spikes insisted.
What do we gain from pulling back now? We cannot lift the pressure until we win this.
Yeah,
Tarkin
you ain't
countered.
winning.
Open your eyes, Will Huff!
Spikes suddenly spat.
The enemy is clearly retreating out of this location. We can win if we let them go at a cost. We will lose if we manage to back them against a wall. We've already won. We just have to finish driving them out.
I will not.
Tarkin began.
Enough. All vessels, switch to main comm line. I will direct you from there. If any...
Oh, he's actually just going to a different comms to get rid of Tarkin. Oh, that's... Yeah, if there's not bad blood already here because clone versus Tarkin, and just, well, Tarkin versus anyone that has bad blood, it definitely exists now. Oh, God, yeah. And Fan mentioned in here that Tarkin was wounded in the first invasion of Axum, as described in his meeting with the others during the strategy meeting. Honestly, that's been so long ago, I completely forgot about that detail. Makes perfect sense, though.
You wish to differ to Admiral Tarkin's direction, by all means feel free to. Everyone else is to fall back to the debris field for protection, moving in a layered withdrawal. Keep the enemy engaged all the while. Never let up.
And this also proves that everyone will end up having to listen to Spikes, because if anyone does listen to Spikes, then the attack pattern, which is already weakened, is going to fail enormously. Also because they're on the ropes right now, only in the sense that their losses are way harder to replace than the Star Wars side. Someone mentioned earlier in the chat that Star Wars ships, even the smaller ones, are decades to centuries in the making, where the entire army of the Republic could be more or less made in, 5 years? So, maybe not as strong, but you can have a lot more of them a lot faster.
Prioritize the use of missiles, torpedoes, and mines. Use them all and prepare for a hyperspace exit.
He ordered before nodding to his comms officer and hearing the line switch to the tertiary command communications line he would be using from that moment on. Whether Tarkin did or did not continue to vie on the main channel for control of the fleet was not something that Spikes concerned himself with, for soon it was clear that the vast majority of the Armada was now taking his orders.
Which also means an
and
attack run is
things
doomed
began
to fail.
Progress quickly from
So
there.
they have to listen to him.
Once given a chance to flee from the stinging shoals of the Republic, the Imperial craft did so, breaking away in their own layered withdrawal, both fleets gradually separating and lobbing munitions at each other from the distance. But even the Imperial forces seemed to loathe to deploy their harder armaments.
Yep.
They appeared to be only concerned with recovering and fleeing with what they could, and as the distance between them stretched and stretched, the fires in the skies began to dim, flickering and vanishing, piece by piece, as most of the Imperial vessels began to depart the system. Most.
But not all. I mean, the obvious one, before Fan obviously just tells it right now, see if I can guess, is the battle cruiser for the Space Marines, which would be over the planet, as well as, if they can see it, the assault cruiser. I'm not really sure what kind of ship it was. It was earlier this episode they mentioned. Definitely not the Inquisitor ship that was super fast and can get to the command point. It was currently dropping the assassins in.
But not all.
I'm assuming we're going to one of those other ships. Or we're going back to St. Lazarus. Okay.
Lazarus and the others were ready, or at least mostly ready. They stood as a group, loitering around the entrance to the basilica as they made ready for what was potentially their final mission. Commissar Leros stood beside Farness, checking his disheveled uniform with a pinched face, while the youth stood at attention. To be fair, he was doing an admirable job of holding his poise well, with only a little sweat on his brow to indicate his present fear of potential and sudden execution.
You know what? I'm giving in. I'm going to say it. I wanted to say this every time I've seen this picture of Farness. I look at this guy and I'm just thinking, this is Farness from New Jersey. It's the hair, man. It's the hair in the face. This just screams peak New Jersey to me.
But Lazarus knew better, knowing that if she did decide to kill him, she would do it at the negotiation meeting, and only if it turned out to be any kind of deception or trap. In fact, the Saint suspected strongly that this was the only reason she was insisting that he act as her guard for the meeting. Keep your enemies close and all of that. Not far from them was Magos Aurora, leaning against the wall in some kind of meditation or resting state.
Interesting
a
art.
large stave axe resting against the shoulder of her intact arm. Standing near to her was a surprising figure to Lazarus, the young, one-armed Krieger from before, who stood straight nearby, holding his pistol in his hand, evidently taking his assigned duty as the Magos' guard very seriously.
This is going to sound weird, but I actually thought he would look like he was in worse shape by now. Considering everything that happened to him, the eye, the arm, literally everything that has happened other than that, he's doing better than I expected. Also because he's a Krieger and he's still alive, so that's literally the bar I'm with right now, so it's a low bar.
He's a proven element.
Was what she told Lazarus when he
Slightly
had
more
asked
legible.
her about the choice, though she had not deemed to elaborate any further.
Lucky 13.
Even so, Lazarus felt that he understood. After all, the young Death Corpsman had saved his life within the Axamite Mall, and had apparently continued to perform admirably, doing far more than merely surviving. Even then, Lazarus was idly scrolling through a data slate which displayed 1313's recent combat reports. He had been one of the first Kriegers to fight his way to the back lines of the Republic bridge defenses and emplacements,
survive,
and had been among the soldiers who had captured a Republic power cell to use for jamming their local communications. He had fought alongside and survived being part of the diversionary force on the park platform, and he had helped to rescue Ishtara Ordain during their retreat from the Avenue. And that was just what had been recorded so far. Lazarus looked up at the warrior, nodding to himself as he did.
If the next person coming in is either the chapter master or the Inquisitor, I'm calling it flat out. We are getting Fan writing his Avengers Assemble moment.
A proven element indeed. Mysterious.
It's like
as
all the different
Magos'
plot lines are
direct
literally
reasons may
converging
be,
here.
He could at least hazard a guess as to why she would make her choice, especially given that all of the combat servitors were either destroyed or damaged beyond acceptable function. As he turned his eyes
Krieger's almost at that
towards
level.
the two others who lingered nearby, he was flooded with a sense of appreciation for the data slate he had on the
Who
Krieger.
else?
For at least he had something. Standing away from the others was the Inquisitor, a throne agent named Samel Weiler.
Yeah.
And close beside him, his own chosen guard, the blonde-haired and blue-eyed young woman who had carried him to the basilica.
And she has the lollipop in the mouth. Oh god. just yeah, we're having an Avengers Assemble moment.
To call them an odd pair would be a certain understatement.
Again, I ship it.
Samael was an enormous man with broad shoulders, a defined face, and shiny black eyes, as if his pupils were dilated at all times.
Probably
In
literally.
contrast, the petite, guard at his side stood comfortably in his shadow, kicking her feet absently
probably
as
the more
she
dangerous
waited,
one
hand twirling and fidgeting with her long blonde hair. Her eyes were an achingly vibrant blue, a blue that was glowing, Lazarus would realize when she caught his eye as he stared. The bags under those blue eyes made her look beleaguered and tired, but her demeanor did not display it, waving at him almost childishly when their eyes had met. What appeared to be a sweet sucker stuffed under one of her cheeks. He was tall and broad, she was small and slender. His eyes were black pits, and hers were like pale quasars, glowing heavily in tired sockets. She was casual, playful, absent-minded, but the Inquisitor was stone-faced, one hand rubbing the stubble on his chin, his mind many miles away within the confines of his thoughts. The juxtaposition was not lost on Lazarus, though he struggled to understand what he should make of it. I guess in the end, it does not matter.
That feels very much like Fan explicitly writing this point to highlight how they have the odd couple dynamic going on of crazy versus stoic. Or when she's in her third phase, crazy versus stoic. And then say, well, it doesn't really matter what the relationship is. Stop asking. I'm not going to write a shipping piece is probably the part he intended to write, but then stopped himself for actually writing because it doesn't fit the narrative. But let's all be exactly honest with ourselves right now. I still ship it. I'm sure a lot of other people do. And I don't think Fan is going to change that anytime soon.
He agreed to the plan. I should be grateful for that alone. Lazarus thought to himself, quashing any questions that bubbled up in his mind. Without that Inquisitor's acquiescence, none of this would have been able to proceed, not with any kind of real legitimacy at least. Lazarus wished to turn his eyes upon the last member of his group, but alas, she was not present with them.
Oh?
Each of them had a guard of their own.
Oh,
Jane
the sister
had Private Eliton. Magos Aurora had 1313. The Inquisitor had his strange knife-wielding woman.
Probably the most dangerous person in the room.
Lazarus, naturally, was permitted to have a guard as well. Unsurprisingly, he had chosen Sister Leandra Ordain as his protector, an assignment he had assumed she would want. And, indeed, when he had told her, she had not seemed disappointed or dismayed by it. And yet, she had hastily departed his side soon after.
Oh?
Leandra had been with him almost continuously since the moment
that her mother had made
clear her will concerning him, with the exceptions being made mostly.
Considering where they're going, is she finding some of her mother's armor? For ceremonial and actual badass kicking reasons. Because hers is destroyed.
Due to orders and necessities of combat. Here, neither were in play, and yet he had not seen her since. Flashes of lightsabers igniting played through his mind, and he felt a sharp thrill of fear cleave through him as the possibility of more Jedi assassins ran amok in his mind for a few shrill seconds.
I mean, to be fair, they did use him already. It wasn't even a Sith ploy. Also, Fan in the chat is mentioning that the Samel-Hecate relationship is more mentor-student, patron and ward, father-daughter, at its most intimate. To which I would say, you have not shown father-daughter. You have shown mentor and student, but frankly, it feels less like mentor and student and more like guard and guardee. So guardian versus guard. He is her guardian and she is the guard. Which admittedly is the setup to a lot of romance style plot lines in fantasy and historical settings. So it's probably the reason I'm falling into that more, because the mentor-mentee patron-ward aspect is kind of a lead into a lot of that. The father-daughter one, you haven't shown a lot of the paternal stuff, if that's what you intended, so it hasn't come across as heavily. But that's just my personal take. Because a lot of what we've seen has been them both being incredibly competent people on their own.
But those concerns were cut down as Lazarus snapped his head around towards the gates to the basilica, taking a step towards it before breathing out a sigh of relief as the missing sister appeared there, walking from the recesses of the temple and towards the group. Lazarus smiled at the sight of Leandra, but his eyes soon swept away from her face and down to what she was holding in her hands. Sister, it's good to see you. I had feared we may miss you, he said as she came close, feeling a sudden surge of cold run up his spine. Again, the former sergeant's eyes were pulled down from Leandra's reddish hazel eyes back to whatever it was she held.
Forgive my lateness, Saint. But being your guardian, I could not neglect this.
What is it?
She explained, her own eyes following his down to her own hands. Lazarus raised the eyebrow on the good side of his face. And what is this, exactly? He asked, Leandra presenting the object to him in response. At first, he mistook it for a ceremonial skull mask, like what the captains and commanders of the Freylin Faithful wore. But soon he spotted the strange, expanding lattice of crystal veins that was spreading out from the...
Are they literally bringing Gax's skull to a meeting with the Jedi? Oh, that is going to give Ahsoka so many what the fuck vibes, and I love this.
Center of the skeletal forehead. Gaxian Krell? Lazarus asked, looking up.
He knows about him?
Whether he is or is not a saint in truth.
Leandra said in response.
His will is still to serve the Emperor, and I would not deny him that. If he cannot be a saint, then let him walk with one and defend him from the vileness of the warp.
She said, extending it out towards him. Lazarus reached out and took the mask gingerly. The skull of Gaxian Krell had been altered, filed and shaped to fit onto Lazarus's face, and turning it around, the new saint could see that...
Oh, I thought he was carrying the crystal skull. No, he's wearing someone's skull. He is going to go to a meeting with a Jedi wearing a Psyker's face. You know, I'm really hoping Gax can't feel anything in his body anymore, considering he left behind physical remains after becoming a Force ghost. Because, god damn. What the hell, man?
Light gravlocks and cushion
right
fibers had been strategically attached into the interior portions of it. He lifted
Added
it,
for comfort,
catching the attention of Commissar Leross as he did. And if Gaxian is a saint? Lazarus asked, his
Two for the
eyes
price of
up
one.
and looking at the finely honed mask, the remains of yet another man who had been raised above his station in this fight.
Then the Republic will not meet with one vaunted saint of the Emperor, but two, and
Physical
our
and
chances for
metaphysical.
success shall be double.
The sister responded.
She's not
prompting
wrong,
a light chuckle from
but also,
Lazarus.
it's a good thing they're meeting Ahsoka,
I
not
suppose
anyone
that
else.
would be true.
Who else would listen to Ahsoka, though?
The dual-headed saint, the former soldier said, before lowering the mask, carefully placing it over his expression and activating the gravlocks, adhering it to his face. It
Weird image, but okay.
was perfectly molded.
How did they find out his facial proportions? Probably the Magos who worked on him already. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to say it right now because I don't think I'm going to ever not think it. It looks like Mark I Winter Soldier.
How did you manage to shape it so well? Spying on me more closely than I had realized, are you?
Oh, they are
Lazarus
flirting.
asked, tainting his tone with a little bit of conspiratorial suspicion, and Sister Leandra seemed to become flustered at that, a rosy tint painting her tan skin.
Never mind, I was making a joke. No, Fan is actually shipping them. Usually he's opposed to that because it's not his thing. No, he's going full in on this one. Got it.
No, we already had the Hospitaller examine you, so naturally they took measurements for your replacement augmentations and...
She began to explain. Lazarus raised his hand to stall her,
Wow.
his face melting into a smile, his mouth and chin still easily visible. I accept this fine gift. Thank you, Leandra, he said with genuine appreciation, and her own expression laxed back into a slightly ruffled smile in return. The saint had expected the cold sensation to intensify as he placed the mask against his face, but contrary to his belief, it did not strengthen. In fact, though it did not exactly lessen, Lazarus did feel that the presence within the mask was somehow smoother now, less uncomfortable, though no less present. Leandra's smile became grimmer and more intense as she looked upon his new visage, and he could see that she was still under no illusions as to what they were about to attempt. Deciding that it was better to get on with it before she changed her mind, he gave her a nod and turned around, facing towards the Inquisitor. "Let's get started then," Lazarus said, and the huge man nodded, pushing off from the wall where he was leaning and reaching into his black coat, withdrawing a fat, black hand cannon. He opened the weapon up and loaded a specific round into the chamber, sealing it with a snap. With one arm, he aimed.
We are actually getting the Avengers Assemble image. Oh my god.
Aimed the gun up, angling it high over the gates of the wall, while with the other, he reached back and covered the eyes
Magos,
of his
13,
nearby
Leandra,
companion.
Lazarus,
The hand cannon
Hecate,
barked an exceptionally
Leros,
loud blast
Farness,
from its muzzle as he
Samel.
fired the flare, and together, the assembled group watched as it burgeoned and began to glow, slowly descending from the sky like a luminescent crimson teardrop, sliding down the face of the encroaching dusk. All but Hecate, of course, who sighed behind Samael's hand, tapping her foot impatiently as she slid the sugary sucker around behind her cheek.
Imperium Assemble indeed. Wait, what? Mortals watched by the eye? Is this a fan readout for a fan or something else?
Rex could see it. That huge red eye. Rex could feel it. Feel it looking into him. Feel it looking into the world. And more than anything.
Oh, I forgot about the Demon Storm. Or the Blood Storm. Yeah, that's...
else. Captain Rex could feel its hunger. The hunger of a god. He felt his own mouth watering in response. Felt his blood boiling.
Oh,
felt
he's possessed.
His teeth clenching. His fists tightening. His eyes burning. Rex? The voice called him back. Almost made him gasp.
What? No, I thought... Okay, so I thought he was possessed. And it sounds like he is, but I didn't think he was one of the possessed clones unless... Is it spreading or is it hitting closer? What the hell is going on? I didn't think he was one of the possessed clones. And I didn't think the storm was that close yet. Unless they're in it. But no, Ahsoka probably would have realized the entire demon aspect because of the psychic aspects. What is going on with Rex?
Shaking his head a bit as he reoriented. The lines of Ahsoka's face patterns helped his stinging eyes to focus, and he placed a hand against his helmet. "Are you all right?" She
His eyes are
asked,
gonna glow red.
concern clear in her voice as she bent over as if trying to look through his visor and at his eyes.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Rex said, straightening again.
It's just bright is all.
He added, gesturing up towards the red eye of God, which shimmered and gradually sank in the distance. Ahsoka turned back towards it and grinned, nodding.
Yeah, it is,
she said, stepping past him and crossing her arms.
It almost sounds like she is not seeing what he is. What the hell?
Standing triumphant as she stared at the distant light.
I think that means I win our wager.
She added with
What
a
wager?
smirk, looking over her shoulder.
No, the flare. That's what they were looking at. So whatever is going on with him right now, is it infecting all of the clones? Because he wasn't in the initial group, as far as I remember. And if they're looking at the flare, he's seeing something that's not there, where she just sees the flare itself.
At Rex.
Wager?
he asked, more than a little disoriented.
Shit, if
Don't
he's
try to
getting it,
back out of
that
it
means
now,
all the
Rex.
clones might be compromised.
Ahsoka added with a laugh as she turned around.
You were sure they would fight to the very end, whether they got my message or not. But that flare up there means I was right. The gamble with Farness paid off, and now...
The former Jedi said, trailing off as she did.
Oh, I just realized what Fan's leading into. There's only two ways this can go. Either it works until someone in the Star Wars command side gets access to what she's doing, in which case the people in charge are Mace Windu, who has gone full corrupted Dark Jedi, or Palpatine, who, no. He might agree and then fuck it up, or he'll just say no and fuck it up, because at this point he doesn't need to worry about that. Yeah. Because those are the two people who would have ultimate command at the moment. Anakin, as far as I know, is still out of contact, so he wouldn't. Or Rex does something stupid because he's possessed and attacks Ahsoka, which would show that she doesn't have the authority of the Star Wars side, which is completely accurate right now. She wouldn't. But also follows into the Imperium, specifically Lazarus's paranoia that someone's going to betray them. Except it wouldn't be a betrayal of them. It would be a betrayal of the person organizing the truce, which is probably the absolute best outcome for Ahsoka.
Rex nodded, remembering. Ahsoka and he were outside of the makeshift Republic base on the edge of the roof,
But also separate her from the clones, which probably saves her from the inevitable betrayal.
God. No, not an eye, a flare. Just a flare. A sign from the Imperial remnants, indicating their desire to meet and treat. Why had he thought differently?
It's
Now
spreading
the
to all
hard
the
part
clones.
starts.
Ahsoka said with a sudden sigh.
Hard part?
Asked Rex, turning to more fully face her. Ahsoka nodded.
Yup. Now that I've convinced the warmongering zealots to attempt negotiation, all that's left to do is convince the Jedi Master in charge here to do the same.
She explained to him.
And irony aside, the warmongering zealots are the more reasonable faction at this point. Yep.
And that's the hard part.
Rex asked, prompting a cringe from Ahsoka.
It is when you consider that we should be able to roll over them with sheer numbers at this point, if not just destroy them from orbit. They want to negotiate only because they have to. And we don't have to. Not at this point.
She said, Rex nodding his head.
And she doesn't know about
Still,
everything
though,
that happened
The
to
clone
Obi-Wan.
added.
it's not like
And
we
Windu.
lose that advantage if we do choose to engage them with diplomacy. If they are unreasonable, then we can just go back to plan A.
He reasoned. Ahsoka only sighed again and shook her head.
Normally you'd be right,
She admitted.
but...
The former Jedi began to say, trailing off again.
But
The clone captain
She's trying to establish
pressed.
something more long-lasting.
Ahsoka looked up at him, biting her lip,
Taking the loss might be
but
more worth it.
firming her resolve as she answered.
But the Jedi Master in charge here is Mace Windu. And after what he did to Obi-Wan...
She started to say,
Oh, she's already aware of that. I thought she was working under incomplete information, but if she's aware that Windu is compromised, then she realizes she's not... Then she knows she's arguing in bad faith on behalf of the Star Wars side, because she knows Mace Windu is not going to listen. So she needs to probably see how much she can get away with before she needs to ask permission.
only for Rex to raise his hand.
right, the hard part.
He said with a nod.
And Rex isn't so
I
far gone,
understand.
he's
Got a
going
plan
that
for how to
just
get
yet.
him on board.
Rex asked.
Ask
Ahsoka
forgiveness after you do it.
shrugging in response.
Appeal to his mercy and Jedi tolerance?
She
Okay, even if he wasn't corrupted, that would never work. Oh, God. Oh, wow, that's, this plan is a little bit troubled.
offered weakly.
Yeah, you may want to come in with something more than that.
The clone offered
Like a lightsaber.
back. Ahsoka shook her head and began
Take
to
yourself
walk
hostage.
back
It's
towards
probably
the
about as
door
effective.
that led inside.
Well, if you think of anything on the way there, be sure to let me know.
She said as she did. Rex nodded, but did not make to follow.
I'll catch up in a bit. Just gotta wipe down my visor.
He said.
Is it covered in blood?
Ahsoka nodding reactively and continuing on. Captain Rex groaned softly when she left his sight, placing a hand against his head. His skull was pounding, and his eyes stung something fierce. He reached up and removed his helmet, breathing in the fresh air and wiping his eyes. And when the clone captain pulled his hand away, he was oddly unperturbed by the red stains which glistened from the end of his armored fingertips.
So either Khorne or Khorne equivalent in the Star Wars side has entered the battlefield. And since I don't think Rex saw anything directly in the warp, that means it's spreading mimetically through the clones. The entire Star Wars army might actually be compromised. Ooh. Maybe he was exposed to something we don't know. But if it is a mimetic spreading between clones, that could be a problem.
God is coming.
Whispered his vilest instincts. Instincts he had trained well in the war he had been born to fight.
God is here.
Specific demon, probably. Is he whispering ahead of the storm, then? So I was told that I need to specifically look through this to see what's in here.
Down upon the grass.
Yes.
Never getting answers.
Yes, still asking.
Ah, I see why people wanted me to watch this. And I already get it. We're getting all the hints of exactly who's in the warp. The Chaos Gods have entered the field. Slaanesh. Tzeentch. More Slaanesh. More Tzeentch. Yeah. Get a bit of Anakin.
Watch them all leave you and me till their silly hearts break.
Yeah. Slaanesh is in the field, and so is a few other things. Oh, what is this? The Existential Nihilist? Oh, it's the other people supporting him. So, images at the end. Really good way to show that there's a little chaos going on at the moment. I wasn't guessing that based on just saying, God is here. But I guess it really hammers it home. Ah. Yeah.
Imperial.
That's a thing. Also, just resetting the video back on my side. Okay. I was wondering when Chaos would make a more direct appearance, and we've had a bunch of people on the Chaos side in here. Kaon. But never direct interference of the gods, because there could be a little bit of the Khorne side, or it could be somewhere Star Wars side when it came to the possessed clones. But no. If those last images are anything of fan, it's like, hey, fun things are about to happen. It's that we're about to get ever-chosen Vader, and honestly, the fact that he's under Kaon's mentorship instead of Palpatine is actually probably exactly the same reason both wanted to take his body as their next possession. Huh. What is with Anakin and getting old men trying to get into him? Okay, I might have misphrased that, but the point still stands. God damn, it's like so much is going on. We got the entire Imperium Avengers assemble moment. We've got everyone on the field, and Fan definitely had fun showing them out there. And then finally, right here, we're getting that little highlight of, oh yeah, the people you thought were on your side, Ahsoka and Rex, there's bullshit going on right now. I can't wait for the next episode next week, is what I would say, except there's a little problem with that. It's the last one. Now, I've heard Fan is working on a massive episode. It'll be like 6 hours long, either in a giant block or in multiple chunks. Either way, I don't care. It's going to be awesome. But the thing is, it's not out yet. So I'm just sitting here going like, this is fine. This is fine. It's not fine. Because I'm about to run out, and I don't want to run out. God damn you, Fan, on writing something that's absolutely amazing and well done and just really fun, man, because you have a really good understanding of the characters and what they remember, how they are interacting and what's going on. You have extensive knowledge of everything going on in 40K, and just, this is well done. If there's ever like a hardback version of this, I mean, you probably couldn't ever actually sell that because that would be both Disney and GW, and between those, GW is the more safe one to do that kind of stuff with, and that's saying something. Yeah. Just Fan in the comment section going, soon, soon. To which I would say, yeah, not soon enough. Soon enough would have been 1 million chapters last week. Yes, it's unreasonable, and I stand by it. And also, I'm aware that my entire ask right there is literally be faster than an AI in how you write things. I stand by it, because if I'm going to be unreasonable, I might as well go full unreasonable. Use time travel, damn it. All the same, I hope he takes as long as he needs and doesn't stress out over this. This is something I'm hoping he is not like burning himself up on. It's never worth it to do that. Unless it's about maybe writing a one-shot where a certain saint and a sister happen to take a vacation anywhere because in the heat of the moment, there's just a little downtime and maybe it just involves some random commissar on a desert world at a random, completely natural oasis giving them advice. I don't know if that would happen. It would be stupid and completely out of non sequitur hellhole or whatever it is. Because it would be Tatooine, of course, it's a hellhole. But the fan shipping and fan art of anything you do in that situation would probably be hilarious. Would it make sense narratively? No. No. But it'd be awesome. Definitely not joking aside. I really love this episode. I love the setup to it. And I just can't wait to see what's going on. And he mentioned in the comments he's doing a rough read tonight. Oh shit, he's actually doing a rough read already. Goddamn. Nice. That also means he has to do all the audio work, the video work. The only thing I'd really say is with his style, just slow down some of the animations to make them feel more grand in the scope, because moving too fast makes something feel bad. So if you just adjust that, a lot of the animations would be really good. I want to see more, and I will get more next week. But after that, it's about waiting on Fan, because it doesn't really matter how much he produces. It's never going to be enough because I just want everything, damn it. Yeah. I'm unreasonable. I'm aware of that. I blame Fan for being a good writer. So if you haven't, links below, hit him up. He's done a great job. Go to his Patreon, support the dude. I'll see you guys in the next one for next week when we finish the so far last episode of the series. That is going to suck until he comes out with the next episode eventually. Hopefully he doesn't burn himself out, but that's going to suck. I'll see you guys then. Adios.